This is lesson 8.6, which is on slope. So number 1 says determine if there is a proportional linear relationship between the time and distance traveled. Show your work. Well, when we're given a table, to figure out if there's a proportional relationship, we just have to compare a couple ratios using y over x. If they have the same ratio, then yes, it is proportional. So let's start with this first one. If time is our x, distance is our y, if we take 100 over 2, that leaves us with 50. And then if I take the next one, 300 over 5, well, 300 divided by 5 is 60. Well, those ratios are not the same, so no, it's not proportional. Then number 2 says find the rate of change. So to find the rate of change, we use change in y over change in x. We can pick any two rows. I'll just stick with these first two. So my y values are 100 and 300. I like to start with the larger, so 300 minus 100. And then our x values that correspond are 2 and 5. But since I started with the 300, I need to start with the 5. So 5 minus 2. 300 minus 100 is going to leave us with 200 miles over, and then 5 minus 2, 3 hours. So we have our two labels, but rate of change needs to be written as a unit rate. So I'm going to divide both of these by 3 so that I can figure out how many miles in 1 hour. So I take 200 divided by 3, and I'm left with 66, and I'll round this to 66.7 miles. And there is my rate of change. And then number 3 says, does the equation represent a proportional relationship? Y equals 4x plus 5. The answer would be no, because there's addition. If there's ever addition or subtraction, it is automatically not proportional. When an equation is proportional, it just has the multiplication of a number in x. So y equals 4x would be proportional. That's because it needs to go through the origin 0, 0 to be proportional. So if I plug in a 0 for x here, I need to get 0 for y. 4 times 0 is 0, so that equation goes through the origin 0, 0. 4x plus 5, if I plug in a 0 for x and solve for y, well, I get y equals 0 plus 5, y equals 5. So that coordinate would be 0, 5, which means does not go through the origin. So no, this is not. So some vocab. Slope is the ratio of a line's rise to its run. So the vertical change to the horizontal change. So these 3 ways to find slope are going to be key. We have rise over run. We have y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And we have change in y over change in x. And then slope is the constant of proportionality and describes the steepness of a line. So we're going to put that to practice. There are 4 different types of slopes. There's a positive slope, which slopes up to the right. There's a negative slope, which slopes down to the right. There is a zero slope, which is a horizontal line. These would be super good to have in your notes. And then there's an undefined slope. That's a vertical line. So if our slope is 0 over 5, if there's a 0 on top, it's going to be a 0 slope. If it's 4 over 0, the 0's on the bottom, it's going to be undefined because you can't divide by 0. So number 1 says a ladder is leaning on a house. Its base is 6 feet from the house, and it is resting on the house at a height of 22 feet. Find its slope. So for this case, we know if we pretend like the house and the grass here is the origin, we know that it's 6 feet from the house, and we know that it is 22 feet high. We're gonna find the slope. And just a couple, or just like a pointer here that's helpful, slope has no labels, unlike rate of change, which has 2 labels. So I'm gonna use rise over run. Rise over run just means how far up or down I have to go and how far left or right I have to go. So if I start at this point here, to get to my next point, I have to go up 22 feet. Since I'm going up, my rise is positive, so it's a positive 22 over, and then my run is how far left or right I have to go. So to get to the point, I have to go left 6 feet. Since I have to go left, it's gonna be -6. If I have to go right, it'd be positive. Then slope just needs to be simplified. So no labels and simplified. So I can divide both of these by 2. And I'm left with 11 over -3. You could also write this as -11 over 3. Either one works. Okay, to practice those, we're gonna find the slope from these graphs using rise over run. And it doesn't matter which point you start with, you're gonna get the same answer either way. So let's say I start with this point down here. My rise, how far up I have to go, is 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's +4 because I'm going up. My run, how far left or right I have to go, is 0, because I don't have to move at all. Because there's a 0 on the bottom, that's an undefined slope. There can't be a 0 on the bottom, it's undefined. Number 3, we're gonna again use rise over run. And rise over run is really the easiest way to find slope when you're given a graph. So I'm gonna start at this point here, and our arrows are already given. So our rise, oh, but I guess it's backward here because it would be run over rise. So let's actually start from this point. Our rise to get to this point would be down -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So again, since I'm going down, it's negative. So my rise is -6. And my run is to the left, 1, 2. Since it's to the left, -2. Then I'm going to simplify this. -6 over -2 is really just +3. You can write the slope as 3, or you can write it as 3 over 1. Either way works. Okay, and then this next one, again, we're given a graph, so we're going to use rise over run. Doesn't matter which point you start with, you're going to get the same answer. So let's say I start with this point. My rise is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up 6, so it's positive. And then my run is left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So to the left 5, so -5. And there's my answer. 6 over -5, it could also be written as -6 over 5. Both answers work. Okay, and then another way to find slope is to use this formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And we're using this formula when we're given 2 points and not a graph. So we're going to go through some examples and I'll show you how this works. So number 5, it's asking us to find the slope, but we're not given a graph, so we can't use rise over run. We're not given a table, so we're not finding rate of change. We're going to use this formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And what we do is I like to start by labeling my points. So we know that an ordered pair is x and then y. So both of these have an x and a y value. But since we have 2, we're going to label these as x1, y1, x2, y2. This helps us to distinguish our points. Then we just plug those numbers into our equation. So y2 is 14. So I plug in 14 for y2. Then I have minus y1 is 6. So 14 minus 6 goes on top. And then I have x2, which is 21. And I have x1, which is 9. So all I did was I labeled my points and I plugged them in to the corresponding variable. Then I'm just going to simplify. 14 minus 6 is going to give me 8. 21 minus 9 is going to give me 12. This can be simplified even further. I can divide both by 4. And I'm left with 2 over 3. And there is my slope. For the next one, again, I'm using that same formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I'm going to just quickly label these points. So I'm going to label this as x1, y1, x2, y2. And then I just plug them in. So my y2 is 4. Then we have minus my y1 is 4 over x2 is negative 8 and x1 is negative 6. So I'm negative 8 minus negative 6. Again, I just plugged in the corresponding number with the corresponding variable. So now I'm going to simplify. So 4 minus 4 is 0. And then negative 8 minus a negative turns into a plus. So negative 8 plus 6 is negative 2. 0 over negative 2, if there's a 0 on top, we call that a 0 slope. If it's a 0 on the bottom, it is undefined. So then this last one here, again, we're going to use that same formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I'm going to label these points, x1, y1, x2, y2. And then I'm just going to plug them in. So my y2 is 8. So I'm going to have 8 minus my y1 is 5. 8 minus 5. And then my x2 is negative 4 minus my x1, change this color here, x1 is negative 4. And then I'm going to simplify this. 8 minus 5 is 3. Negative 4 minus negative 4, so those turn into a plus, so negative 4 plus 4 is 0. Since my 0 is on the bottom, that is undefined. So again, we use rise over run when we're given a graph. We use this formula when we're given 2 points. It's important for slope to be simplified and there's no labels. If there's a 0 on top,